So thank you so, oh, the song's still playing.
The song's still playing.
Thank you so much, Tig, and welcome to BlogHer, our
you.
10th anniversary, and we're really happy to have you here.
Thank you. How's my hair?
Your hair's awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have a hair person backstage. We could bring him out.
We have a hair person?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, totally. So.
I missed the boat.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I wanted to actually, you sort of came into my consciousness with that whole tipping point of your album, being on the Louis C.K. site and selling your album there, that story of that moment when your life culminated in all these bad things happening and you just sat out of it. But from what I've read you say, you had a somewhat charmed life. So before we talk about that moment, tell us about growing up barefoot in Mississippi and the charmed life. Tell us about being a working comedian, coming out of Mississippi and a woman and all of that, and what that charmed life was before.
Well, I mean, a charmed life meaning I'm happy and I appreciate who I am and where I'm from, but it wasn't like my life was just perfect and everything was great and then it fell apart for 4 months. And I mean, I can't assume that everybody knows what happened, but for 4 months of my life, a couple of years ago, everything in my life fell apart. I had pneumonia, and then I took antibiotics and ended up contracting this potentially deadly illness called C. diff, which it's where a bacteria takes over and eats your digestive tract. And then when I got out of the hospital and I'd lost over 20 pounds, a few days later, my mother tripped and hit her head and passed away. And then I went through a breakup and then was diagnosed with cancer. So that was all in a 4-month period of time. And I did this performance right after my diagnosis, talking about everything I'd gone through, and it definitely was one of, if not the lowest points in my life. But it was, like I said, I've had plenty of downfalls and imperfections and imperfect moments in life.
But you were already a working, busy comedian.
Yeah.
Many people might have known you from like Conan or
This American Life, or the Sarah Silverman program,
Officer Tig.
Officer Tig. But that show kind of launched me into a different arena because of all of the, it went viral, and that's how it took off.
Right. So what was your, before all of that happened, and you're this working comedian, a lot of our, everyone here is a writer, and many, many people here are humor writers or aspiring humor writers. And I'm curious about what was your process. You had an everyday life with its ups and downs, right? And what was your writing process then, and has it changed since that point in your life when first all those things went wrong, and then you created something viral out of it, and now your life is probably a little different, and is your...
Yeah. Well, and I didn't mean to create something viral. I'm like a total oddball here. I'm not on Twitter I have a Facebook fan page, but when I did that performance at Largo, I had no idea people were tweeting and blogging, and I woke up the next day thinking just the 300 people that were at the venue were who I shared this with. And then the next morning, my email was full, my voicemail was full, texting. I was offered book deals, and Rolling Stone and New York Times wanting to talk to me. And I describe it as feeling like this happening to somebody's great-great-grandmother. Just like, what on earth happened while I was asleep? But I was baffled, but things definitely changed for me for my career, and as far as my writing process and my style, I would say what's changed the most is I didn't really share too much personal stuff about myself, and whereas now I'm way more open to that. And before I used to be very kind of shut off to that sort of thing. And as far as my process of writing, I actually write on stage. You would never go through my computer and find my material written out. I have little notes and words that I'll write that I know I want to talk about, like barefoot cousins, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that story.
Right.
And bury my girlfriend.
That's an awesome
It'd be
note.
a very creepy list to come across.
Right. It's an awesome note for her to find lying around.
Or anyone to find. Don't forget.
Note to self.
Yeah, bury girlfriend. So I enjoy being on stage. I find that I enjoy being on stage and letting my stories kind of figure themselves out and unfold right there, because there's this fight or flight thing that goes on in me when I'm telling a story, and I feel like I can come up with a punchline, the best punchline, I feel like, right there on stage.
And it was always that way? That was always your...
No, I feel like it's gotten more and more that way over the past few years.
Yeah.
And but really, it was still that way before my set went viral. But I think it's just more personal stories are coming out, and like I said, finding the punchlines live on stage in front of an audience, because you have to think of something. And when I'm writing, it's not as electrifying for me than to just say it.
So a lot of bloggers deal with this kind of boundary issue around how much do we talk about personally and how the people in our lives feel about how much we talk about online. If that was a change for you, how did people around you feel about that? And did it change who your audience was?
My audience is so amazingly all over the place. There's just wild comedy nerds. There's housewives with one boob from cancer, There's the gay community. There's the NPR world, and it's such a sea of mystery out there. It's so fun. But I can't remember what you asked me.
That's sad because it was brilliant. No, did it change? Did the people in your life
around
care
me
that you started talking about more personal stuff?
No, I was curious how my stepfather was going to react. He never really took an interest in anything I was doing or my career or my life, really, until my mother died, and this story kind of went viral, and he was starting to read about me in publications he had followed.
Yeah.
And then I think it made him kind of go, what is she up to, And he's such a robot. I always jokingly referred to him over the years as C-3PO, but less emotional. Yeah, I was scared when he heard the album, because he was like, Tig, I downloaded your show, and I, first of all, couldn't believe he used the word download. I was like, you did? And he said, yes, I listened to it on my machine. This is somebody that every night unplugs his computer before he goes to bed because
From
he
the
doesn't
wall?
want to get any emails while he's asleep.
All right.
I'm like, good thinking. He has no clue. And P.S., nobody's emailing him. He thinks he's controlling it, but like nobody is emailing him. But I thought he was going to possibly have a problem with the performance that I did because I made light of certain parts of my mother's unexpected passing, but he was very impressed and touched and respected what I did, and that I couldn't believe he listened or approved. And so it's been nice. I haven't had any sort of backlash from personal or public, as far as I know. Maybe everybody can't stand me and are very angry with me.
No, I think you would know. But it's interesting because usually people say that distance is what makes, that's that equation, pain plus time equals comedy or whatever it is. And the thing that's so interesting about the set you did is it was so immediate. It was so right then. It was so, all that stuff had happened. And last but not least, you got the diagnosis, what was it, 24 hours, 48 hours before?
Well, today is 2 years ago to the day that I was diagnosed.
Wow.
And
yay, diagnosis.
Yeah, but I mean, people will say to me, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And to me, it's actually one of the best days of my life because I got my diagnosis, and it's not, of course it was a horrible day, but it was the beginning of so many great things to come, which was my life continuing and my health. And so, yeah.
I mean, not to mention, obviously, catching it early enough.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, so I was diagnosed on July 25th, 2012, and then it took me about 9 or 10 days before I went to see an oncologist or surgeon because I was backed up emotionally about so many of the other things that I'd gone through that I was not anxious to go find out any news. And my friends and family were just losing their minds, wanting me to go talk to somebody. And I was saying, why don't you try, a breakup and losing your mother and not being able to eat food, and then speed on over to find out your fate with cancer. So it was the day before. So the 25th was my diagnosis, and then August 2nd, I think, was when I met with the doctor and was told my cancer was invasive. And then August 3rd, the next day, is when I went on stage at Largo.
And did you know, how much did you know when you walked out there, the ground you were going to cover?
I mean, I knew I was going to talk about my breakup and my inability to eat food and losing my mother and cancer and all of it. I just thought that the way that my life had gone to that point, it had slid so far downhill so quickly that I had no real reason to have faith that things were going to have such a positive outcome. And so when I was told I had invasive cancer, I just kind of thought that might be my last time to perform, and I love stand-up so much, and I wanted to do it one more time, and there was nothing in me that felt like I could go on stage and make any sort of lighthearted joke, like pretend like none of that stuff was going on in my life, and just be like, hey, so this is crazy. I was at the grocery store, and meanwhile my mother, just everything had fallen apart, and so I wanted to be honest and authentic about what was actually going on, and just take that risk. And I pictured it going horribly and still went on stage to do it. And the show went way better than I imagined. There was still, I mean, it's a very awkward show. There were people laughing and crying and stunned, but I pulled it off way better than I thought.
Is there video of it? Because I'm only
No.
listening to the audio. Because what's so interesting is to hear people, they think you're kidding,
Yeah.
or some of them do.
Yeah.
Ha 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 ha. You know, like there's a reaction of, oh, wait a minute, she's serious. And then there's just, it's this it would be so interesting to see the video because you can't,
Well, yeah.
even just listening to it, you can feel that in the room of people sort of not knowing how to react and then just getting on your bandwagon and going with you down that path.
Yeah, it was, I didn't know how to go into the material. And in the shower that night, maybe an hour and a half before the performance, I kept thinking, I'm like washing my hair going, God, how am I going to start talking about all of this horrible stuff? And then it just like ran through my head quickly, like, what if you just walked out on stage going, hello, good evening, I have cancer, how's everyone doing tonight? And it made me laugh so hard. Just to deliver that as though I'm saying, hey, how's it going? Anyone drinking tonight? Just that same delivery, but just such a different message. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. I was scared I would offend somebody. And then it hit me. I was like, oh wait, I have cancer. This is my story. So I decided to kind of, it's just that process of editing and get right into it immediately.
Well, I'm curious, you say, you're afraid you might offend somebody, and that's a conversation I've seen going on online around comedy, and particularly misogyny in comedy, rape jokes, things like that, and the differing perspectives of everything should be up for grabs for comedy, or there are things one should stay away from because they shouldn't be made the brunt of someone's joke. I'm curious what your perspective is on that.
I mean, I feel like it is so helpful. I mean, there are so many people that do it the wrong way, that they miss the point of, and they're just wanting to shock and upset people, but they're comedians that can really crack a topic open in a way that's mind-blowing, I think. What's that? No moleste. That's right.
Okay.
That is a joke of mine. Oh, thank you.
Oh, so can you tell it?
I mean, it's just,
I don't know what she's referring to.
well, it's a joke of mine. But are you saying like that is a taboo? Okay. Oh, right. Right. Tell the joke. Well, yeah, it's basically a joke about when I check into hotel rooms and put the do not disturb sign on the door, and then I say, or for the Spanish speaking, it's no moleste, and then I'm like, I actually haven't told the joke in a long time, but the idea is that like, what kind of horrible place am I staying in that the management knows there are sexual predators running around, that they give everyone a note, a sign to put on their door to say, nope, none for me, thanks. But then there's the option of turning it around and being like, si moleste. So, I mean, you'd have to, I guess, hear the whole thing, but...
No, that was pretty... I got it. I got the gist there.
Yeah, that's the gist. I just realized, God, speaking of editing, that's like a 3.5-minute bit, and I just edited it down to 20 seconds.
All right, tighten it up, right?
Yeah.
I think another thing that I really wanted to ask you about, because A lot of folks in this room, we're in a way, many of us are independent publishers, and we are doing something without the gatekeepers that used to, anyone can express themselves, put their voice out there, and create a business. A lot of women in this room have created a business out of what they're doing online. And so there's something really interesting about what you did with that set once, it became notable by selling it as a digital download on Louis C.K.'s site, which became, I'm wondering if it became Grammy-nominated, but not going the normal route through a record company. Had you had a comedy album before through the traditional route?
Yes, and it has No Moleste on it.
So there you go.
The album is called Good One. Go out and get it now.
There you go. I think it's on iTunes.
But
but you made the choice to go another route.
I did. Well, the day after I did that performance at Largo, Louis C.K. called me. He had been at my show and was tweeting about my performance, and he called me the next morning saying, I think that you should release that album. And he said, I think you should release that performance as an album. And I thought he was insane because it was material I had never said before, and when you put out an album, it's something that you are working on and crafting for a long time, and then you're like, I got it perfect, and then I'm going to release it. And so it seemed odd and scary to just do this bizarre performance of, hello, I have cancer, and then be like, yep, it's ready to go. Hopefully that'll be nominated as a Grammy. I just didn't feel confident in the performance because it was so wonky. And Louis was like, no, people have to hear that. And I was like, he said, I want to release it from my website exclusively. And I said, I appreciate that and it's flattering, but I am not releasing that. And then about a month and a half later, after I really thought about it and thought how possibly I could help people that have gone through cancer, any sort of, or just having a bad day, just that to hear somebody going through that and trying to navigate their way through, I hoped it would be helpful and thought I should put my ego aside and just take that risk. And so I called him and said, you know what, I'll go ahead and do that. And then we released it on his website as a pre-release for 3 weeks. And then it went to iTunes and record stores. And but I do have a record label. It's an indie rock label called Secretly Canadian. And they...
We have some Canadians here.
That's great. They're not Canadian, though. It's just like a silly name, but I'll let them know that you guys were here and cheered on their company. But yeah, so the record label, their stamp is still on Live as it is on Good One, and so, but yeah, it was a weird way to release it.
But would you do it that way again? Would you go back to the, what do you think you'll do
I don't know
forward?
if my accountant would let me do it that way again. It was so complicated with my taxes because Louis did not want to deal with my record label, so he cut me the check, and then I had to sign the check over to my record label, and then they had to write me a check. And so my accountant was just like, wait, what happened? And I was like, I don't know.
So I think we have time for a couple of questions. Is that cool? And we have a mic. Where do we have the mic?
Oh, there's the mic.
Oh, yes, there's a question.
Hi, question.
Hi.
Say your name and your blog.
Sanji Clark. My blog is todaysmastectomy.com.
Nice.
I share positive stories about my experience and other women's stories that have had mastectomies. Is it possible you would maybe want to share your story on my website if we could talk after this or connect after this?
To share my story about my mastectomy?
Correct.
Sure. Meaning an interview or what?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Could be short and sweet, long. We can discuss all that. That's what I do is I share my story and other women's stories in a positive light.
Okay, great.
And your story appears to be
great.
Positive.
Great. I hope it is. I'm not hiding some dirty secret about my mastectomy.
Right.
After we uncovered everything,
Thank you.
we found out Tig had a negative mastectomy.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a question over here.
Hi, my name's Ann Boyd.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry, I was just looking at that line going, wow, you're throwing your voice, aren't you?
Super talented.
I wanted to know, do you still run into Taylor Dayne?
I have not run into Taylor Dayne, and for those that have no idea what she's referencing, I ran into this 90s pop star. She's kind of fallen off the charts, and it's so fun to see somebody just be like, have you run into Taylor Dayne? And then just walk away.
Drops mic.
But I ran into this singer several times, and I earnestly told her that I loved her voice, and every time she was rude to me, and I decided to kind of do a scientific experiment to see how she would respond each time, and every time she was rude. And then you have to hear the story, but
is it on one of your albums?
It's on my Good One album.
Available
and you can
at iTunes.
You can also watch it. There's footage of it from This American Life online. You can watch it, which I think is the best version to listen to. But after running into Taylor Dayne so many times, after my diagnosis, we met and exchanged numbers, and she texted me saying, if you need anything, call me at any time. And I just thought it was kind of funny that this person who had been so rude to me, it was nice, but she's probably the last person I'm gonna when I'm lying in my hospital bed wanting to talk at 3 in the morning, maybe I'll call Taylor Dayne. So I haven't run into her in a while is the answer, I guess.
Cool. Over here.
Oh.
Hi, Tig. My
Hi.
name is Jess. Big fan.
Thank you.
I've watched a lot of videos where you've done interviews, and I was curious. You had shared that you and your partner did a lot of voices with one another,
Yeah.
and I wondered if the baby helped you pack.
Yes. This is so weird for people that have no idea what. It's like code. You listen to Professor Blastoff? Yeah? Awesome. That's my podcast. And yes, the baby helped me pack.
All right.
Are you wanting to hear? This is so humiliating. This is a voice. Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. This is a voice I did on Professor Blastoff, and I'm struggling to do it for you, but here goes.
Yeah. All my little outfits in my little suitcase. Yeah.
Is that it? Listen to the podcast. You'll hear it on there.
Okay. Last question, I'm sad to say. Over here.
Okay. Well, last time I got cut off right before the last question, so I'm feeling
This
very
is your
lucky right
karmic
now.
payback.
Oops,
This
you
is
just missed your time.
Yeah. Oh, and
Yeah.
damn, we're done.
Boom.
So I'm Stephanie Reed Simons. I'm with Woot.com. We do comedy and retail. They go together great. Anyway, you're not on Twitter. I'm befuddled by that. I think other people are maybe befuddled by that. That's such an outlet for so many comedians, and I'm just curious to know more about like why you've chosen to not go that way. If what it might take to get you to, make the leap. Maybe a room full of people saying "Get on Twitter" might do it. I don't know, but I think you'd get a lot of follows.
You have to do it how Sheets did it, like get on Twitter. I just, for some reason, I just find my Facebook fan page just more manageable and not as, I don't feel like every thought that I have, I need to get out there immediately, and I don't want to be reading everybody else's thoughts constantly. It doesn't interest me. Like when people are like, oh my gosh, you have to follow this comedian, or this person's so funny, or this, I just don't want that constant interaction. I don't know, it just doesn't, I'm not like refusing and holding off to be, it doesn't even slightly interest me. I'm the worst person to be here, I think. Everything that you love, it's just not my world. Okay, 2 more questions.
Oh.
No.
Well, I'm glad that you're not going to end with "you're the worst person to be here," because you're the best person to be here.
Oh, thank you.
I'm Jen
Thank you, 3 people.
I'm Jen Posner. I'm a journalist and a blogger and a big comedy nerd. And I'm glad that you mentioned somebody mentioned the no moleste joke, because a couple of years ago when that whole Tosh thing blew up, I wrote a really long piece where I interviewed a bunch of comedians about rape jokes in comedy. And my premise was that there is a difference between rape culture jokes, like the one you told, and rape jokes that are more exploitative. And the line between exposing some sort of injustice or satirical political point, or just basically making fun of somebody's weakness or somebody's humiliation. And I wondered if you, what you think about that line, and if you think where is the point as a comedian that you make the decision to sort of illustrate something that somebody might find really challenging, but that other people seem to do in a really more exploitative way that you seem to do in an enlightening way?
I have no idea. I mean, to be honest, I feel like it's not really my style, so it's something I'm not that experienced in. I mean, I have peers that touch on topics like that, and like I was saying before, it's just some people miss the mark terribly, and other people, I think, crack it open in a more helpful, useful, and comedic way. I don't really know what else to say beyond that.
No problem.
Yeah.
We put your, I think if I remember, it's been 2 years since then, but we put your no moleste joke in a remix that we did, a few of us did, of sort of a bunch of rape jokes that were negative versus ones that could actually, where basically it was, feminists aren't against rape jokes, we're against horrible rape jokes.
Yeah.
So we used yours as an example of something people should aspire to.
Well, thank you.
Awesome. And that is a positive note on which to end. Please join me in thanking Tig Notaro.
Thank you so much. Oh, another awkward standing ovation. Thank you. Bye.